Hey everyone, and welcome back to the 5 p.m. podcast. I'm Dan.
And I'm Tina. And Dan, I gotta say, I've been seeing this story pop up everywhere, and I'm times curious to hear your take.
Oh, you mean the Canadian Anthem protests? Yeah, it's a pretty wild situation, to say the least.
Wild is one word for it. For our listeners who might not be caught up, we're talking about Canadian sports fans. We're talking hockey and basketball, booing the American times national anthem at games in Canada.
Right, and it's not just a one-off thing. It's been happening in multiple cities, across different sports leagues. It's a asterisk statement.
And that statement, from what I understand, is all about tariffs. Specifically, U.S. tariffs on Canadian imports, right?
Exactly. President Trump put these tariffs in place. 25% on some imports, 10% on others, including energy. And, well, Canadians are not thrilled.
Not thrilled is an understatement. So instead of, writing letters to their representatives, they're taking it out on the Star-Spangled Banner?
It's a pretty direct form of protest. And, it brings up this whole idea of national anthem protests in general. We've seen those in the U.S., obviously, but usually they're directed at asterisk domestic times issues.
That's what's so striking. This is fans booing the anthem of asterisk another times country. It feels different.
It is different. It's a sign of how deeply these economic policies are affecting not just the economy, but the actual relationship between these two countries.
Because the U.S. and Canada historically are like best buds, right? Close allies, huge trading partners.
Best buds. And there's a asterisk ton times of cross-border traffic, families split between the two countries. It's a very intertwined relationship.
So these tariffs are hitting close to home, literally.
And it's not just symbolic. Canada retaliated. Prime Minister Trudeau put tariffs on American goods in response.
Okay, so it's a trade war, basically, playing out in the hockey rinks and basketball courts.
That's a great way to put it. And I was reading this article in Time magazine, and they quoted a Detroit Red Wings player, Patrick Kane. He's American. And he said, "It's too bad, right? You can maybe understand it from this side."
Wow. Even the American players are acknowledging the asterisk reason times behind the booing, even if they don't agree with it.
It's a tough spot for those athletes, for sure. They're kind of caught in the crossfire.
I can imagine. You're there to play a game, and suddenly you're in the middle of an international incident.
And it's not just the athletes. There was another quote from a Toronto resident, Joseph Chua. He said he's going out away now, while grocery shopping, to avoid American products.
So this is impacting everyday Canadians, and they're making conscious choices to, essentially, boycott American goods.
It shows how these economic policies can have a ripple effect. It's not just about the big trade numbers. It's about individual choices, too.
It's about national pride, too, I think. It's a way of saying, we're not going to just stand by and accept this.
And, historically, there have been instances of this kind of thing before, although it's rare. Back in the early 2000s, during the Iraq War, there were some similar incidents of Canadian fans booing the U.S. anthem.
So it's not completely unheard of, but at times unusual. And this time, it's driven by economic policy, not military action.
Which makes you wonder, how long will this last? Is this a temporary blip, or is this going to be a more long-term shift in the U.S.-Canada relationship?
That's the big question, isn't it? If these tariffs stay in place, if the trade dispute continues, the booing might continue too.
And it could even spread to other areas. We're talking about sports right now, but what about other cultural exchanges? Tourism? It could have a chilling effect.
It's like the U.S. and Canada are having a fight, and it's spilling over into everything else.
Exactly. And, one thing that really struck me is the contrast at that Raptors game in Toronto. The fans cheered the asterisk singer at first, but then booed the asterisk anthem times itself.
Oh, wow, that's powerful. It's not about disrespecting the performer, it's about the message.
And then they cheered loudly asterisk for the Canadian anthem, "Oh, Canada."
So it's a very deliberate act of protest. It's not just random booing, it's a pointed statement about national identity and, really, about economic fairness.
And it makes you think, what are the alternatives? What times could Canadians do to express their displeasure?
Well, there's the consumer boycott that we talked about. There's always political pressure, contacting representatives, but there's something about the immediacy and the visibility of protesting at a sporting event.
It gets attention. It gets people talking. And in the age of social media, it spreads time fast.
That's true. A video of fans booing the anthem? That's going to go viral a lot faster than a press release about trade negotiations.
And that viral spread is something that governments can't ignore. It creates a public relations challenge, at the very least.
Do you think the U.S. government cares, though? I mean, will they change anything?
That's hard to say. It's a very complex situation, and the U.S. government has its own priorities, obviously. But public pressure, especially from a close ally like Canada, times can, times have an impact. It might not lead to immediate changes, but it could influence future negotiations.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It's a fascinating and kind of unsettling example of how economics, politics, and even sports can collide.
Unsettling is a good word for it. It's a reminder of how interconnected we all are, and how decisions made in one country can have very real consequences in another, even during a hockey game.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for breaking it down for us, Dan. Always insightful.
Anytime, Tina. And thanks to all of you for listening. Join us next time on the 5 p.m. podcast.